The charity golf tournament in Littleton was supposed to be predictable. But then something completely unexpected happened near the 13th hole. A bobcat kitten stepped onto the fairway like it owned the place. Oversized ears, clumsy paws, and the fearless confidence only a baby wildcat can have. And it wasn't alone. One by one, 3 more kittens emerged. 4 spotted little troublemakers, locking onto a stray golf ball like it was the greatest prey they'd ever seen. Why were they here? Where was their mother? And what secret was she carrying just out of sight? Stay tuned, because this isn't just a story about kittens. It's about survival, community, and the most unexpected rescue a golf course has ever witnessed. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. David Townsend had photographed just about everything a person could photograph in Colorado without needing a headlamp and a therapist afterward. He had photographed tearful wedding vows under cottonwood trees, toddlers with cake frosting on their ears, and CEOs holding novelty-sized scissors in front of ribbon that absolutely refused to cut cleanly. He had photographed sunsets so polite they looked staged, and thunderstorms so rude they looked personal. On the morning of the Arrowhead Golf Course fundraiser in Littleton, he expected the usual. Polite smiles, firm handshakes, earnest speeches, and men in bright shirts trying to look casual while quietly keeping score like it was the Olympics. He brought the long lens anyway, out of habit, the way some people brought a lucky coin, or antacids. It was a charity tournament after all, and charity tournaments had a certain rhythm. Good intentions, mild competition, and a small parade of golf carts that moved like slow, well-fed beetles. Lynn Townsend, his wife and business partner, adjusted her hat, checked the light, and reminded him, as she always did, that he was there to get the people shots first. David nodded as if he was listening, because he was listening. But his eyes kept drifting toward the rough edges of the course where the green gave way to brush and scrub oak, the kind of boundary that always looked like it was hiding a secret. Arrowhead backed up to open space near Roxborough State Park, and anyone who lived in the area knew the truth. The manicured fairways were a ribbon stitched onto a much wilder quilt. Mule deer wandered through like they paid dues. Hawks patrolled overhead like security guards with wings. And every so often, if a person stayed quiet and lucky, they might see something that made them forget the fundraiser entirely. By the time the first groups reached the 13th hole, David and Lynn had already collected a healthy stack of tournament cliches. A laughing foursome posing with oversized checks, a volunteer holding a clipboard like it was a sacred text, and a man in a visor practicing his swing with the intensity of someone trying to crack a safe. The wind carried the clean smell of grass and the less poetic smell of hot dogs from the snack cart. Somewhere, a microphone squealed. It was all very normal. It was all very safe. Then Lynn saw the movement. It was small at first, just a flicker beside the fairway near the brush line. The kind of motion that could have been a bird, or a leaf, or someone's golf ball rolling somewhere it had no business rolling. Lynn nudged David with the practiced urgency of a person who had watched her husband miss too many shots by being distracted by interesting clouds. David turned his head, and his photographer's brain, always hungry for patterns, immediately registered that the movement was wrong for a bird and too purposeful for a leaf. It was low to the ground, stop and start, like a tiny creature trying to decide whether courage was worth the effort. David raised his camera, expecting maybe a rabbit, or a fox if the day felt generous. What stepped out instead looked like the universe had decided to prank the entire sport of golf. A bobcat kitten emerged from the brush beside the fairway with the serious face of a miniature mountain lion and the wobbly confidence of a toddler wearing adult shoes. Its ears were too big for its head, its paws too big for its body, and its spotted coat made it look like someone had tried to paint a wildcat and got distracted halfway through. It paused, blinking into the open like it couldn't believe the audacity of a lawn this perfect. Then it took a few steps forward and froze again, staring down the fairway where golfers had just teed off. It looked, for one ridiculous moment, like it was judging their form. David's finger hovered over the shutter, and his heart did the small leap it always did when nature showed up uninvited and magnificent. Lynn inhaled sharply, and the two of them instinctively backed up half a step, as if distance could be created by respect alone. They were not the kind of people who tried to get closer to wild animals for a better angle. They were the kind of people who had learned, the hard way, that a better angle was not worth a rabies exposure and a bruise to the ego. Then a second kitten appeared, and then a third, and then a fourth, like a tiny committee emerging for a very important meeting. 4 bobcat kittens, all within a few feet of each other, gathered at the edge of the fairway with the wide-eyed wonder of creatures who had discovered the world's strangest playground. The golfers, mostly middle-aged men and women with charitable hearts and competitive souls, did not notice at first. They were walking down the fairway, talking about their drives, their back pain, and their grandchildren. One man was explaining how he had switched to a different putter and how it had changed everything, which was the sort of statement that, on a golf course, was considered a sacred testimony. The group moved on, leaving behind the quiet space around the tee box, and that's when the kittens made their move. A stray golf ball sat in the grass near the rough, bright white and smug, the way golf balls always looked after they escaped responsibility. The first kitten approached it with exaggerated caution, lowering its head, lifting one paw and tapping the ball as if it might explode. The ball rolled an inch. The kitten leapt backward 3 inches and puffed up like it had just faced down a grizzly. Then it crept forward again, ears forward, tail twitching, and tapped it again. The ball rolled, and the kitten's entire body lit up with excitement. This, apparently, was the best invention the world had to offer. The second kitten took one look and decided the first kitten was doing it wrong. It dashed in, grabbed the ball in its mouth, and lifted its head like it was carrying a trophy. For a heartbeat, it stood there, proud and slightly cross-eyed from the effort. Then it started trotting away with the ball, only to realize the ball was round, and round things did not respect the laws of kitten pride. The ball slipped free. The kitten's paws tangled. The kitten rolled forward in a somersault that ended with its back legs in the air like it was surrendering to a very small enemy. David's camera clicked like a typewriter trying to keep up with comedy. The third kitten, sensing opportunity, pounced on the rolling ball and missed it entirely, landing with both front paws on its sibling's tail. The sibling yelped, spun, and they both tumbled together in a furry knot. The fourth kitten sat back in the grass, watching them with an expression that looked exactly like disapproval, the kind a grandmother might wear when her family starts arguing at Thanksgiving. Then, as if deciding it had to restore order, the fourth kitten marched forward, placed one paw firmly on the ball, and stared down at it like a referee. The ball rolled anyway, because golf balls did not respect authority either. A volunteer marshal in a bright vest noticed David and Lynn crouched near the edge of the fairway and hurried over, ready to scold them for stepping where they shouldn't. Then he followed their gaze and went completely silent. His mouth opened and closed twice, like a person trying to form words but finding only vowels. Finally, he whispered, Are those bobcats?" Lynn nodded, and David kept shooting, careful not to move too quickly. "Kittens," he murmured, "and they've decided golf is their new religion." The marshal pressed a hand to his chest like he needed to remind his heart to behave. "Oh Lord," he said softly. And then, because he was American and practical even in moments of wonder, he added, "We need to keep folks back." The kittens continued their nonsense with wholehearted devotion. One batted the ball so it rolled into a shallow dip and then stared at the dip like it was a magic trick. Another tried to carry the ball again and ended up waddling sideways like a drunk sailor. The referee kitten watched, unimpressed, until it suddenly launched itself into the chaos with a leap that was more enthusiasm than accuracy. All four kittens collided with the ball at once, creating a furry pile that looked like a moving hat. David caught what would later become his favorite frame. One kitten mid-air, paws spread, eyes wide, flying over the ball like it had invented the concept of an aerial assault. The shot was crisp, the background soft, the moment absurdly perfect. It was the kind of image that made people laugh before they even understood what they were seeing. A few golfers returning toward the tee box spotted the scene and stopped short. One woman covered her mouth, her eyes instantly bright with joy. A man in a polo shirt whispered, "Oh my gosh," as if he'd stumbled upon the world's gentlest crime. Another golfer raised a phone, then lowered it again, unsure whether the act of recording might somehow ruin the moment. It was a fundraiser, yes, but suddenly everyone had forgotten what they were raising money for. For a brief pocket of time, the entire course belonged to four kittens and a golf ball that was having the worst day of its life. Staff members arrived with the careful urgency of people who understood both wildlife and liability. The assistant pro, a calm woman named Marcy with a sun visor and the steady eyes of someone who had broken up more than one on-course argument, held her hands out in a soft backup gesture. "Everybody give them space," she said, voice gentle but firm. "No approaching, no feeding, no trying to help. Just enjoy from right here." A man in the crowd, the kind of well-meaning guy who always believed he had the perfect solution, said, "I've got some beef jerky in my bag." And Marcy looked at him like she could turn him into a sand trap. "Absolutely not," she said, and the man immediately decided he had never said anything in his life. David and Lynn edged farther back. Lynn's face held that familiar tug between delight and concern. "Where's their mother?" she murmured. That was the question that changed the tone. Because kittens, bobcat kittens especially, did not usually show up in the open without reason. They were brave in the way only the very young could be, but they were also vulnerable. If the mother was nearby, she would be watching. If she wasn't, then something had gone wrong. Marcy must have been thinking the same thing, because she turned to the marshal and said quietly, "Call Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Tell them we've got 4 bobcat kittens on the course near 13, and we need guidance. Also, tell them we're keeping everyone back." The marshal nodded and stepped away, already dialing. The crowd, sensing the shift, softened their excitement into quiet respect. A few people drifted back to their carts. Others stood still, hands folded, as if they were in a small outdoor chapel. The kittens kept playing, blissfully unaware that half a dozen adults were now worrying about them like family. And then, in the brush line beyond the fairway, a shadow moved. David's lens snapped to it instantly. He didn't see the mother at first, not clearly, because bobcats were built for disappearing. But the movement had intention, and the brush had a pattern that didn't belong to wind. A pair of eyes appeared for half a second, amber and steady, watching the kittens with a focus so intense it made David's skin prickle. The mother bobcat was there. She was not panicked. She was not charging. She was assessing. Lynn saw her too and felt her breath catch. The mother's posture was low and controlled, her body half hidden, her ears rotating slightly as she listened. She looked healthy, strong, the kind of animal that didn't survive by accident. But there was something else, something subtle in the way she held herself. An exhaustion that didn't match her strength, like a parent running on determination and 3 hours of sleep. The mother bobcat did not step onto the fairway. She stayed at the edge, using the brush as a curtain. She made a low sound, so soft that most people didn't hear it, but the kittens did. One kitten froze mid-pounce, ball forgotten. Another dropped the ball like it had suddenly become unimportant. Their heads turned in unison, ears sharp, bodies instantly alert. And that was when the plot of the day revealed itself. The kittens weren't just playing, they were practicing. They trotted toward the brush line in a loose cluster, then paused, then glanced back at the golf ball as if tempted by one last round. The mother made that low sound again, and the kittens, with the reluctant obedience of children being told it was time to leave the playground, began moving toward her. But they didn't go straight. They went in short bursts, stopping to look around, stopping to sniff, stopping to get distracted by a leaf that dared to move. One kitten actually tried to drag the golf ball toward the brush like it planned to take it home, and the ball rolled out of its mouth again, and the kitten looked offended, as if the ball had broken a promise. The referee kitten gave the ball a final, disdainful tap and walked away, tail held high like a judge leaving court. The mother bobcat stayed hidden, but her eyes never left them. When the kittens reached the brush, she shifted slightly, and David caught the smallest glimpse of her body as she turned sideways to make a path. It was then, in that sliver of visibility, that he saw what everyone else missed. A thin, pale strap caught on a bit of scrub oak, not on the kittens, on the mother. It was subtle, just a flash of material against fur. But David had spent his life noticing details. The strap was tight against her side, disappearing beneath her coat, and something about it looked wrong, like it didn't belong in the wild. Lynn leaned close, voice barely audible. "David," she whispered. "Is she entangled?" he said, the word tasting sharp. "She's got something on her." Marcy, still holding the crowd back, noticed their expression and followed their gaze. David gestured quietly toward the brush, and Marcy's face tightened with the kind of concern that came from experience. She had seen animals caught in things humans left behind: rope, wire, plastic, the careless leftovers of normal life that became deadly in the wrong place. The mother bobcat moved again, and the strap caught once more, confirming it wasn't a trick of light. The kittens disappeared into the brush, and the mother followed, but not before she paused and looked out over the fairway one last time. For a heartbeat, her eyes met David's lens. It wasn't a cute moment. It wasn't funny. It was something older and heavier, an animal making a choice. She had brought her kittens into the open, into human space, because she needed them to cross a boundary she couldn't safely cross alone. She needed a clear path, a place with fewer hidden threats, a place where she could keep them together while her own movement was compromised. The golf course, ridiculous as it was, had become her corridor. And the golf balls, those bright, harmless orbs, had done something even more ridiculous. They had kept the kittens still. They had turned 4 wild little bodies into a stationary, playful cluster long enough for the mother to rest, assess, and gather them without scattering. It wasn't that the mother wanted them to play golf. It was that the golf balls had acted like the world's most effective babysitter. A wildlife officer arrived within the hour, along with a Colorado parks and wildlife biologist, and the tone of the fundraiser shifted into something quietly cooperative. The staff rerouted play around the 13th hole, turning the tournament into an impromptu detour that golfers accepted with surprising grace. People spoke in softer voices. Jokes were still made, because Americans made jokes when they were nervous and when they were happy and when they didn't know what else to do. But the jokes were gentler now, like everyone had agreed to keep the day from tipping into chaos. The officer listened to Marcy's explanation, then to David's observation about the strap. He nodded, expression serious. "If she's entangled, she could be getting weaker," he said. "She might be hunting less effectively, which means the kittens could be at risk too. We'll see if we can locate her safely. But we're not going to chase her and push her deeper into trouble." A woman in the crowd, silver-haired and wearing a pink cardigan despite the mild weather, raised her hand like she was back in school. "Can we do anything?" she asked, voice full of concern. The biologist looked at her kindly. "You already did," she said. "You kept your distance. You didn't try to feed them. You called professionals. That's what helps." The woman nodded, satisfied, then added, "Also, I would like it noted that those kittens are clearly better at stealing balls than my husband is at finding them." That earned a ripple of laughter, lightening the moment without breaking it. Later, after the kittens were gone and the mother had vanished back into the open space, the fundraiser resumed in a slightly crooked shape, like a song returning to its melody after an unexpected key change. People played their rounds, they ate their hot dogs, they made their donations. But the story had already taken root, spreading from cart to cart, phone to phone, table to table. David and Lynn sat under a shade tent and reviewed the shots on the back of the camera. The images were, in a word, absurd. Tiny bobcats with golf balls, a kitten mid-air like an action hero, a furry pileup that looked like a comedic accident. But threaded through the comedy was that one heavier frame, the brush line, the mother's eyes, the hint of the strap. The tournament organizer, a cheerful man named Greg, who had been stressing all morning about raffle tickets, leaned over David's shoulder and let out a long, low whistle. "Those are the best photos we've ever had at this fundraiser," he said. "We usually get pictures of guys holding trophies and pretending they're not sunburned." Lynn smiled, but her eyes were thoughtful. "What's the fundraiser for again?" she asked, even though she already knew. Greg pointed to the banner behind him. "Front Range Wildlife Recovery," he said. "They do raptors, foxes, occasionally bobcats when they can, the whole deal. We raise money for medical supplies and transport and habitat work." David blinked, and Lynn's hand went to her mouth in disbelief. Not because it was shocking, but because it was perfect in the way life sometimes was when it decided to be gentle. All morning, they had been photographing a fundraiser meant to support wildlife rehabilitation, and the wildlife itself had shown up and written its own appeal. 4 kittens had turned a golf course into a stage. A mother bobcat had silently asked for space and time, and the humans, for once, had mostly gotten it right. That was the twist that made David's throat tighten when he least expected it. The day wasn't just cute. It mattered. Within 48 hours, David's photos were circulating far beyond the golf community. Local news picked them up, then national outlets. People who had never heard of Arrowhead or Littleton or Roxborough clicked, laughed, and then read the caption about where the course backed up to open space filled with wildlife. They zoomed in on the kittens' faces. They shared the aerial-style shot and wrote things like, "This made my day," and "I didn't know I needed bobcat golf content until now." Front Range Wildlife Recovery received a wave of donations. Some were $10, some were 100. One retired man mailed a check with a handwritten note that said, "For the kittens who stole a golf ball and gave me back my smile." A local sporting goods store offered to sponsor wildlife-safe disposal bins for fishing line and straps and other hazards that ended up in open space. Arrowhead staff partnered with volunteers to do a sweep along the course boundary, collecting litter and stray materials that could entangle animals. It wasn't dramatic heroism. It was the slow, practical kindness that actually changed outcomes. And a week after the tournament, the wildlife officer called Marcy with an update. The mother bobcat had been located using trail cameras set along a quiet corridor near the open space. She had been moving carefully, favoring one side, and the strap, likely from an old piece of gear, was confirmed. A humane plan was set in motion. A monitored, baited enclosure placed in a safe area where the mother could enter without panic, guided by her own choice rather than chased by fear. When she finally went in, the team moved with calm precision. They covered the enclosure to reduce stress, transported her to a veterinary partner, and removed the strap without injury. She was dehydrated, tired, and thinner than she should have been, but she was strong. After a short recovery and assessment, she was released back into the same open space, close to where her kittens had been seen. Marcy shared the news at the next staff meeting, and even the grumpiest groundskeeper, an older man who claimed golf was a walk ruined by math, blinked hard and cleared his throat like he'd gotten dust in his eye. David and Lynn returned to Arrowhead later that month, not for a tournament, but for their own quiet walk along the edge of the fairway near the 13th hole. They stayed on the proper paths. They didn't try to look for anything, because nature didn't perform on request, and because they respected the boundary. They simply stood, listened, and let the wind move through the scrub oak. They didn't see the kittens again. They didn't see the mother. And that, oddly enough, felt like the happiest ending. Because if 4 bobcat kittens were no longer tumbling around in the open with stolen golf balls, it meant they were where they belonged. Hidden, learning, growing, becoming the elusive wildcats people rarely got to see. It meant the mother was strong enough to keep them out of human space. It meant the silly little golf balls had done their strange job for one brief day, and then returned to being just golf balls. On the drive home, Lynn glanced at David and smiled. "Do you realize," she said, "that after 25 years behind the camera, your favorite photo might be a kitten committing petty theft?" David laughed, the sound warm and honest. "It wasn't theft," he said. "It was a community outreach program." Lynn shook her head. "It was grand larceny, and I support it." David looked out at the rolling edge of open space, where wildness began the moment the grass ended. He thought about the mother bobcat's eyes, the way she had chosen the fairway as a corridor and the golf balls as a distraction, not because she trusted humans, but because she understood the shape of risk. He thought about the crowd that had stepped back instead of stepping in. He thought about how laughter had turned into help, and how help had turned into a second chance. In a world that often felt too heavy, 4 kittens had done something hilariously small and unexpectedly powerful. They had stolen golf balls, they had stolen attention, and without meaning to, they had stolen everyone's hearts long enough for people to remember what mattered. Keep distance, call professionals, protect habitat, and let wild animals stay wild. And somewhere beyond the fairway, in brush and shadow, a mother bobcat moved quietly through her world, unburdened, her kittens trailing her like small spotted comets. No longer golfers, no longer thieves, just wild.